Okay, volume online. Thank you. Continuing or re-engaging your inner and outer posture of wakefulness, attentiveness, receptivity. A sense of embodiment can be helpful to sense in and feel the weight of the body where it's supported by earth, the weight of your feet on the floor, the weight of your body on your tailbone. And maybe 3 intentionally deeper breaths. And on the exhale, inviting the body to soften, to settle, to let go of any extra effort. And letting the attention rest lightly on the feeling of the breath moving through the body. And maintaining this sense of practice. Kind of background practice that's happening as you're also listening. There's a quote from Mark Nepo. When we hesitate in being direct, we unknowingly slip something on, some added layer of protection that keeps us from feeling the world. And often that thing covering is the beginning of a loneliness, which, if not put down, diminishes our chances for joy. It's like wearing gloves every time we touch something and then forgetting we chose to put them on. We complain that nothing feels quite real. Our challenge each day is not to get dressed to face the world, but to unglove ourselves so the doorknob feels cold, the car handle feels wet, and the kiss goodbye feels like the lips of another being, soft and unrepeatable. So these days of practice, we've been focusing on a quality of gathering the mind, letting the mind be collected around the feeling of the breath moving through the body, cultivating samadhi. This is a calming effect on the body and the mind, and supports our ability to see our experience more clearly. If the mind is jumping around, unsteady, very difficult to get a clear vision of what's happening in our experience. A little bit like if you had a camera or a telescope and you're just trying to hold it steady, but there's some shaking, images are blurry. And samadhi is like the tripod that stabilizes the mind so that the image can be clear. Everything we experience in this life, all the pleasure, all the pain, every single thing that constitutes this thing that we call life is an experience that arises in consciousness and awareness. The experience of our life is made up of these sense impressions appearing in consciousness. We see a sight, we smell a smell, we taste a taste, we hear a sound, and thoughts appear in the mind. And one of the shifts we make in this contemplative practice is maybe becoming less overly concerned about what's happening in awareness, but more in how we're relating to that experience. It's in that relationship actually where we find freedom. And now we're going to expand the instructions. There could be a sense of holding the attention on the breath more lightly, not fighting against the other things that are arising and calling for our attention, but rather cultivating the capacity to meet whatever is arising with some sense of ease or grace. And the Buddha described various ways to place the attention, to cultivate mindfulness, starting with the body, which we've been doing, and then moving into feeling tone. The Pali word is Vedana, and it's the experience that arises anytime something is appearing in awareness. See a sight, smell a smell, hear sound, thought arises in awareness, and there's this essentially simultaneous experience of that being pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Of course, this happens on a wide spectrum. Things that are mildly unpleasant, things that are very unpleasant, things that are mildly pleasant or very pleasant. And it's said in the Abhidhamma, the later sort of commentaries and extrapolations of the Buddhist teachings, that this is a universal quality of mind that's kind of almost essential for consciousness. Consciousness carries with it this property of Vedana that we experience. And it's conditional, it's highly variable from person to person, and highly variable even in our own experience. The first piece of pie, very pleasant if you like pie. The third, the fourth, maybe not so pleasant. Electronic dance music, pleasant if you like to dance. If you're trying to sleep, very unpleasant. I see a cockroach, I think very unpleasant. I know someone who's from a certain part of China where it's a delicacy. And so he sees a snack, and I'm told that deep fried is the best. And the Buddha said that, Vedana is so important because it's the place that we can actually see where we cling to pleasant experiences, we brace against unpleasant experience. And you really begin to investigate this factor of mind, you can see almost the vast majority of the mundane decisions that we make, and even the larger movements of our life, are influenced by this desire to move towards what's pleasant, to move away from or sometimes deny or ignore what's unpleasant. It almost becomes a kind of paradigm for or recipe for how you achieve a happy life. You line up all the pleasant things right here, shiny, beautiful, happy things, and the unpleasant things you push to the side, pretend they're not there, don't engage with them. And of course, this paradigm is unsustainable because we can't maintain that. We can only rearrange the furniture so many times. And even in those moments where the conditions are perfect and everything is pleasant, it doesn't last. The nature of conditions is that they're always shifting. So inviting this investigation as we continue our contemplative process, and really an investigation that can happen anytime or any place. The suggested structure is to maintain the breath as a primary object of awareness. And in the moments that you notice that the mind has wandered, thinking is happening, a very good place to investigate what's the Vedana that's present. There's often something quite interesting or pleasant that attracts our attention, and also things that are unpleasant, uncomfortable, pain that attract our attention. That's the first indicator. It can also be quite helpful to make a very light mental note. Oh, pleasant. Oh, unpleasant. Neutral. The neutral is quite interesting because usually if it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant, we kind of zone out. There's nothing to attract the attention. You actually have to be more attentive to have this experience of neither pleasant or unpleasant. And as I was saying last night, one of the gifts of this practice is the ability to cultivate an easeful relationship with what's unpleasant. Because we don't get to choose all the time. The chant that we did this morning, the 5 recollections, reminds us of the nature of being in a human body in this realm, subject to aging, sickness, death. All the things that are dear to us, one way or another, we'll lose. All the things we think we own, we're actually only renting for this period of life. This is the reality of the sort of existential question that the Buddha tried to answer. How do we live with some ease and grace in a world that's built like this? And so the beginning of this training is to relax into moments of unpleasant. And we can use the hindrances as a marker of this. So we notice a longing, some sense of lack, some desire. And it can be quite nuanced. Maybe there's some pleasant in it. Maybe some pleasant, the idea of the wish being fulfilled, the thirst being quenched. And the painful part of the longing of not feeling complete, not feeling whole in some way. And we can use Vedana as the object of contemplation in the same way that I was describing last night, to feel that it's definitely a quality in the mind. It's very subtle, maybe, um, but also where that appears in the body. And the body is in reaction to some experience, places of tightness and energy moving and tingling, vibration, pulsation. Each of these having their own quality of pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. You start to notice that most of our moments of reactivity are in response to usually an experience that's unpleasant. We could get over exuberant or energized in that way if something's highly pleasant. And this morning, Kedasara was talking about karma, and central to that notion is that we can water the seeds of what's wholesome, what's uplifting, what's energizing. And we can abandon the seeds of what's unwholesome, what's filled with ill will or greed or confusion. And we find when we sense into those states of mind, those states of heart, the things that are forward leading, that are skillful, that are wholesome, they tend to be pleasant. They tend to have a pleasant Vedana. The things that are unskillful, states of greed, confusion, delusion, can be more nuanced. Anger or ill will can have that kind of positive valence. But when we look more deeply at those experiences, we can see that they are unpleasant. There are the tricky things in between, the addictions and the have a veneer of pleasant until we look more deeply. And then we can expand the instructions just a bit further, bringing mindfulness to the mind itself, to know the mind, to see the underlying attitude of the mind, which is maybe more subtle than thinking, a kind of mood of the mind. We have this expression, wearing rose-colored glasses. It's like the color of the glasses through which you're viewing your experience. That described different states of mind, mind that's angry, the mind that's deluded, the mind that's distracted, the mind that's lustful, wanting, greedy. And you can see again the theme that these contain these central streams of energy, these three poisons: greed, hatred, delusion. When the mind is filled with these qualities. We can notice the greedy mind, and we can notice when these qualities are absent from the mind. We can notice when the mind is distracted. We can notice when the mind is collected. We can notice when the mind is angry or when the mind is filled with clarity and love. We can notice when the mind is confused. We can notice when the mind is unconfused. Anytime there's a moment of suffering, hindrance is present, you're caught in a hindrance, it can be useful to check into the attitude of the mind. For me, it's a little bit about like, what side of the bed did I wake up on? If I woke up on the angry side of the bed, then that colors my whole experience of that day. And so it's a way of getting some feedback. You know, today's a grumpy day. Why might that be? Oh, the mind is grumpy. And there's a way in which this body-mind system is always seeking a kind of equilibrium. If you run up a flight of steps, be out of breath, panting, blood pressure rises, respiration rate rises, heartbeat rises. But as soon as you come into stillness, the body seeks its own equilibrium. We know this. We have complete faith that the body will do this for us. And the heart is like this too. The mind is like this too. And we can begin to see this in the specialized conditions that we're in, renouncing distractions, being in silent, renouncing most responsibilities, continual stream of practice, that we begin to see how it actually is in the mind, how is it in the heart. And the undigested matters of the heart just begin to appear. Sometimes as soon as we sit down in silence, we say, oh, wow, there's grief here. And this practice, this Pali word sati got translated as mindfulness, but it could just as easily have been heartfulness or full-heartedness. And for all the techniques and all the problem solving and all the things we can do, there's a way in which just awareness itself has a kind of healing quality. And this is really embedded in the seminal teaching of the Buddha. There is suffering in this life, and that suffering is to be known, to be experienced, to be felt, to be understood. And then we can build more intimacy with this flow of experience. And connecting more deeply to the countless minute sensations that constellate an experience. The encouragement continues to be to relate to the immediate felt sense experience, what's happening in this moment, right now, in this body mind system. But just to say a little bit about thoughts, since they're pretty much always happening, one thing we can notice is that the state of mind, the emotional experience is heavily influenced by our thinking. Kisara was saying the mantras that we're unintentionally or unknowingly reciting to ourselves. So as you keep the breath primary and you notice the moments of distraction, the moments of being caught in thought, you can notice pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, usually not neutral. And then maybe just briefly checking in to see if there's a view in that thought. I'm miserable, I'm stuck, can't do this, this is too hard. If I just can get it just this way, get rid of that thing, get this thing, then it'll be okay. With this, Buddha said that all phenomena are preceded by mind. So with this thinking, with this mind, we fabricate our reality. What kind of reality do we want to create? And the more and more we rest in this space of attentiveness, space of noticing our experience, begin to see how it's always changing. Each thought, each emotion, each state of mind, rising, passing away. The movements of energy from thoughts and emotions, like clouds passing through the sky. The sky may seem obscured, but it's vast and endless. And there's more and more freedom as we begin to learn to identify more from this place of knowing, more with the sky, more with awareness itself. become less preoccupied with what's happening in our experience and more interested in experiencing it. And as Kidasara was saying, that which knows sadness is not sad. That which knows restlessness is not restless. That which knows anger is not angry. All experience arising in awareness, passing away. Quite interesting to me that we naturally claim our thoughts, our emotions as ours. My thoughts, my emotions, we very easily identified with them. And yet, when we hear a sound arising, we don't usually think, oh, my sound. It's just sound. It's arising, we hear it, it passes away. Actually, no different than the thoughts, emotions arising and passing away. You can see this even in the breath. Breath arises, breath falls away. And as our practice matures, as we mature in this path of practice, we more and more have the courage, the capacity, the resilience to meet this moment, however it is. Noting unpleasant without being overly reactive. Noticing pleasant without being sucked in. We can always return to the most elemental, most simple practice, breathing in, knowing that you're breathing in, when breathing out, knowing, feeling, experiencing, breathing out. can practice with the attitude of nowhere to go, nothing to get, nothing to get rid of, no one you have to be or become, no one you have to take care of. Just to be alive is enough. Just to be alive is enough, and we can connect with this aliveness of the body through the very breath that keeps us alive. So we're very much in the heart of the retreat. Um, I just want to emphasize the subtle shift I'm suggesting in practice. We can continue to have the breath and the body be the central point of focus and interest and investigation. And maybe a good way is to distinguish slightly between different practices. So in the beginning, generally the encouragement more is when you notice a distraction, just come back to the breath. Notice a distraction, come back to the breath. You might call that a samatha practice, shamatha in Sanskrit. Its effect is more tranquilizing, calming the body. And now a slight shift into what we might call vipassana. So when we notice that the mind is distracted, we can investigate. Primary point of investigation, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Another point of investigation, the quality of the mind that's present, or emotions that are flowing through, to be with that experience. Inevitably, in that process of investigation, we again become distracted. And when you notice that, it's time that you can come back to the breath, a sort of like cycle of practice that's fruitful as we deepen into the retreat. So a few announcements. We will continue to have